Welcome to Conversations with the USA Racewalking Foundation.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to another session of Talks with USA Racewalking. Today we have Noel Paine, who I'll call the Pied Piper of racewalking, at least for Canadian social media presence. Lots of people have been doing it longer than you, but you came on the scene a year or two ago, realized there was sort of a void in the Canadian presence online of racewalking, and that's how we got to know each other. Why don't we just start with your background, and you can tell it to our audience better than I can, how you found racewalking and where you came from in terms of running and other athleticisms.
Sure. Well, just thanks for having me on this chat, Jeff. Really appreciate it. This is like you said, I am really a new race walker. I've been running for, I hate to say it because it'll make me sound old, but over 35 years. I've run everything from, track as a youngster to road races, marathons, Boston, done ultra marathons, up to like 250K, and, had fun, always challenging myself. Not the fastest, but, just over 15 minutes for a 5K. So, I had some decent potential. But as I've gotten older, I was always looking for new challenges. And while I was doing that, I've always been a writer. So when the pandemic hit, everything shut down. So, every single race you can imagine, there wasn't much to do. We're locked in our houses. But I was still writing. And I'd always kind of had sort of race walking just sort of in my periphery. So off here is something interesting. I think I had tried it in some hotel hallway when I was like a track kid, and we tried to do race walking. And I interviewed Evan Dunphy, which I think is a name anybody in the race walking world will know.
Well, why don't you clarify who Evan is?
I was just going to say that. I hate to assume.
Who might not understand his greatness.
Yeah, the Canadians know, but Evan's so an Olympian, Canadian record holder, and the last Olympics won a medal, so a bronze, and a great guy. So I had reached out to Evan thinking, hey, it's kind of like the weird cousin of running. So I wanted to sort of talk to him about how race walking might benefit runners. I did a little chat interview with Evan, and it was the pandemic, and I had finished the interview, and I said, oh, what the heck? Let's see how fast I can go race walk with little knowledge of the sport that I have, and see how fast I can do it. And really, that was it. I tried it, and I kind of got hooked. I liked the challenge of learning the technique. I wanted to see how quick I could go. I had nothing else to do during the pandemic, and it kind of went from there. And then I just found a passion for the sport.
So how long ago was that, to put it in perspective? 3 years?
Yeah, about 3 years now. It's gone quickly. Yeah, so it's been about 3 years. I mean, I must admit that the fact that I picked it up relatively quickly, I think, and like I say, my experience of things is still limited, but it was interesting. I picked it up quickly, did fairly well right off the bat, and just had fun with it. So that really got me hooked, and I found the sport just unique, and it's got an interesting history and a different community than running as well.
And how would you say the racewalking community has embraced you since you started?
I think they have, and they haven't at the same time. I mean, I think any community who's with some weirdo that pops up out of the blue and's overly enthusiastic and wants to do things and get things started. I'm sure you got a few strange looks, like, who is this? What's he doing? Even now, I think. I mean, I haven't been at this very long. I've been writing and an athlete forever. But in general, it's been really positive. I mean, race walking doesn't get a lot of attention in the media. A lot. Usually it's the butt end of a joke every once in a while. So I just saw a niche, especially in Canada, to try and bring the community together, and I formed a Facebook group for Canadian race walkers, and then jumped on Instagram and the Twitter to try and share some things from the sport. So I hope I don't come across as someone who's trying to be more than he is, but I just saw a gap, and I thought, well, I can do this. I'm done social media before. So that's kind of how I'm trying to fill or
So,
contribute to the community.
so you don't, even with your book, describe yourself as a race walking expert. And I chose my words carefully. You're a Pied Piper.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think I try and spell that out in the book and say, look, I'm really just sharing my experiences. I realized talking to more and more walkers and race walkers in the US and Canada and even abroad that a lot of us still learn the sport almost basically on our own, often with help of, someone like yourself or Dave McGovern or, Carmen doing her thing with her, Reshad and her group, Carmen Jakinski, that often people get help. But definitely in the beginning, a lot of people really are looking around for help on how to learn technique or even get started. So I just looked at it as a way to share my experience and gather advice and information from others. So it wasn't me giving advice, more trying to share what I had found and point people in the right direction for that next step as well.
Sure. And, you mentioned you've been running for, I think you said 34 years. I have been race walking longer. I won't say how much longer, but it is long.
One of us must be older.
Potentially, maybe I just started very, very young. That said, people like myself that have been in the sport have seen lots of people come into the sport with enthusiasm, and when they first see race walking and they see it in a microcosm, they're like, this is the sport that's growing. And the sad reality is, although we have elites that are achieving greatness, and I think Canada has done better at the highest level than the United States has, we're not seeing the masses of race walkers. We're not seeing the depth that we saw when I started, which was in the 80s. I'll date myself a little bit, where we had many, many walkers under an hour and 40 minutes for the 20K. And now we still have walkers who are under 125, which is great, but they're like on an iceberg by themselves. And so who are any of us old school people who have been involved in race walking to say that someone like you coming in, trying something fresh isn't a great idea? So, you give us an idea of how fast you're walking now, just to put it in perspective, because you actually have come a long way, and you poo-poo a 15-minute 5K where many of us couldn't even dream of such a thing, right? So you have talent as a runner. How did it translate to race walking?
I think I definitely have some talent. I know Olympic level, but like running, I always had some talent. With race walking, it's an interesting one because it's really technique based. So honestly, I think some of the fitness and maybe the genetic speed thing sort of gave me an ability to walk a bit quicker maybe than some people starting out. So I wasn't starting out from a lack of fitness. I wasn't starting out from maybe the same place as other people because I think it's very individual. But yeah, I went fairly quickly from walking and trying to learn the technique to 7 months later, walking 25 minutes for a 5K.
Yeah, that's not a typical curve, right?
That's not a typical curve.
You're being modest, but you have some innate ability to race walk that was, whether it was genetically or physically programmed into you.
Yeah, that is a definite truth. So I often find it interesting talking to others, and even my partner, which I try to do actually, because my perspective is a little bit different than others. I picked it up relatively quickly, and so it's interesting to talk to other people and find out what is they find difficult. Is it the straight leg? What aspects of race walking, picking up the technique, were difficult? Or so yeah, I think it's what I've learned is it's very individual for certain people. Certain people seem to have an ease with the technique. Others find it very foreign. So yeah. But I did pick it up quite quick, and it's good fun.
I mean, some runners flip to race walking and they cannot straighten the knee properly.
Yeah.
And they have such a strong fitness level in running, they want to try to maintain that speed or the natural cadence, and they really have to take a step back and go slower in order to be able to go faster and be legal later. So let's talk about your journey. So, it's the middle of COVID. People aren't putting on clinics the way we used to put on clinics. How did you go from reading a book and seeing a video to learning more about race walking? Because that's really what the journey of your book is, right?
It is, and I think that's what I wanted to share. I thought I'm usually one of those people that I figure I'm kind of like the barometer or thermometer of things, where I kind of right in the middle. I figure if I have some issues or had trouble figuring things out or finding information, that probably a lot of other people will as well. So yeah, I did that time trial. I think it was, I don't know, 5:30 or something per kilometer. My eyeballs basically bulged out of my head, and I thought, well, this is interesting. But then is when I started searching for more and more information on race walking. I found videos on YouTube trying to figure out what even real race walking looked like. I had interviewed Evan Dunphy, but I hadn't really seen or paid attention to race walking in the races, not the technique, because I wasn't doing it. I just would see it. So looking on YouTube and looking for books on race walking. And then, of course, in that search, I came across yourself and Dave McGovern and Reshod race walking shoes. So those are the types that I stumbled across. And then as I was learning it in those few months, I came across your site specifically, because when you do nowadays, it's all Google and whatever's on the internet is the first place many people go. I found your website and information and your book, and so that got me started. But even then, I think I did notice the fact that it was hard to find people who race walk. That's what I really noticed. And I started to learn more about the sport. But throughout that period, I did notice it was very hard to find anyone, especially in Canada. I mean, Canada's huge, same as the US, that I could race walk with. I stumbled across we have a local race walking club that I had completely no knowledge of before, discovering race walking. And like many clubs, I think in Canada and the US, anyways, I think it's a little bit different in Europe. That a lot of the older walkers. So I think I was only maybe 3 or 4 months into race walking, and I went out with the club that I stumbled across, and great folks, very friendly. But I think I would have been like 40. Oh, gotta give them a wage, mid-40s. And I was by far the youngster. I was like the toddler in the group. And I think that's very common, but it does make it difficult for. I love it when I get to call myself a younger athlete, to learn and pick up the sport. When a lot of people around you are mid 60s and they're edging up in 70s sometimes, who are learning the sport, and they're great. They're pushing. You realize much later too, how talented they are for their age group, but. Yeah, I found that difficult as well, trying to find somebody that I could train with or go for a walk with. So that was part of the learning process. And yeah, I just lucked into things as well. I think this is something that I hope people, have the chances to find someone to walk with. A few months, I think maybe the first year, I found a training partner, and that's very unusual. So anybody watching this who's just getting into it, I mean, I feel for you as well, because I had to learn on my own. But I did find a training partner who came from Ireland. Brian is a great guy from Ireland who's had a lot of race walking experience. So I got the chance to train and talk to someone and go train with someone who was race walking. I knew he was legal. He had a lot of experience. I was able to confirm that I wasn't, being a complete idiot and bad technique. So that's kind of how my journey went from kind of like fumbling around, trying to find clubs and information and books and YouTube videos, and then doing my first official race walking event it's kind of how things got rolling. It's like the first year, fumbling around, looking for info, doing it on my own, and then eventually really connecting with the race walk community at my first sort of leading up to my first official race walk event. So it's kind of my journey.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk advice that you were given, because you obviously reached out to lots of people. Let's do your top three. And if you remember who gave you the advice, give them a shout out. But what kind of advice helped you on your early journey?
It was funny. I was really, because I'm on social media, and social media, it's amazing who you can connect with. You got a lot of really good advice from the elites right off the bat, which was amazing. That's what actually really encouraged me as well. Evan Dunphy, who I keep mentioning, really personable, really friendly guy, just in general. Does a lot with kids sports, a program here that helps kids through sport. But when I reached out to him, I was a complete nobody, really. I interviewed him as a writer, but when I reached out to him mentioning that I wanted to try and learn race walking and try and figure out the technique, I may have posted a video or something. And he was completely open to giving me some tips on just race walking in general, like the technique.
So share some of those tips with us. Like,
okay,
what?
sorry. Well, like
I'm looking for some meat, so people
I'm looking for some meat. I hear
right
you.
Can glean from you obviously have the charisma to get people to come and talk to you. Everyone might not have that ability, so share some of that wisdom.
Sure. I think one of the biggest tips, I mean, eventually you gave me, and everybody's given me as well, is to really focus on the technique at first. Stop worrying about going fast right off the bat. And as somebody that's me. I'm not interested in going out for even a casual walk. I'm pounded. I want to go quick. So one of the things really was to ease things back in the beginning, focus on learning the technique, because without the technique, you really can't go as quickly as you'd like to go. And you're going to learn improper technique if you just push and go for speed as opposed to legal or proper or efficient technique. So that's one of the first ones that came across from everybody. That was a general one. In the beginning, like I said, I had a bad example because I picked up the technique quite quickly without really any good reason for doing it, picking it up quickly. But that was one of the big ones that came across from Evan. Rachel Seaman as well, who's in the U.S. now, married to Tim Seaman, a U.S. race walker, Olympian and everything. She helped me out as well, pointing out things. But yeah, really good. That's when I realized that the race walk community is quite welcoming and positive.
Sure,
that
way. But I'm looking for two more specific pieces.
Okay, two more specific.
See, this isn't like the network news where they get off without answering the question.
I'm usually on the other end of things doing this, so I completely know where you're coming from, right? So I agree.
I'm the product of two OCD parents, so I'm going to keep pounding you until we get to the answers. So two more good pieces of advice. Obviously, focus on technique before going fast. Mainstay. Great advice.
What were the other good pieces that really helped me? I'm trying to think. There was, one of the other ones that comes up, I'm thinking of good thing. This is something too that people are always thinking about as they're starting to race walk. So one is the technique, and really that focus on going slower, learning the technique was one. Number two, which comes up a lot, I think you've talked about it on videos and on your sites and books, what shoes to wear. I mean, that's that one that comes up a lot, right? You want to know, what should I be race walking in? So that comes up a lot. People are often runners, or they're used to wearing running shoes going out for a walk. So that was one of the other tips.
So tell us what your shoes gravitated to. We're looking for specifics, not generalities.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and everybody, I got advice from yourself, Ian Watley, who's another name. People should look that one up as well. been in the shoe business and race walking field for a long time. Race walking is a little bit different than running. It just is. How you land, how you roll through is different. So the requirements for having a good shoe for race walking is different than having a good running shoe. And I should preface that by saying, of course, like I'm sure you would agree that everybody's foot is different. Everybody is different in terms of age, weight, flexibility, technique, everything, the surface that you're walking on. So it's going to be very individual what someone finds comfortable and helps them to walk better. But race walking shoes in general should be a little lower profile. Now, by that I mean kind of a little bit sort of flatter. Okay, if I'm trying to use the simple terms, it's flatter. So a lot of running shoes, you'll see it a little bit higher in the heel, and then it sort of goes down towards the toe.
Zero drop or minimum drop shoe.
Exactly, yeah. And I didn't want to use those terms because not everybody's familiar, but it is exactly what it is. So the zero drops, in other words, is as little drop from heel to toe as you can get. And some race walkers and walkers, they like shoes that are a little bit higher in the heel. Not crazy, but they should be not quite the same as a running shoe. A little bit, maybe a little bit lower profile or zero profile. And still be flexible. They shouldn't be too firm at the heel. It shouldn't be too soft. And should allow you to kind of roll from heel to toe, which is a little bit different than running. Or running, you will impact at the heel, depending on how you run, and then roll towards the outside, and then toe off. Race walking kind of does the same thing, but it's definitely more pronounced roll from initial heel contact all the way through, and then push off. So anybody who's starting out as a runner, and this is advice I got from everybody as well, is that you may need a different shoe. Your running shoe might be okay, but you should look at it, try it out. You'll probably notice. You want to be able to sort of smoothly go from heel to toe as you walk. There shouldn't be a slap. There shouldn't, and you're basically going to have to, and what Ian was always told me, I had a great conversation with Ian Wadley, where we talked about, we're both kind of shoe geeks as well. So he talked about, all the modern running shoes and all the everything else. And in the end, the shoe that's going to work for you is the one that works for you. But go get some advice on, read up, there's my book or Jeff's website or Jeff's book or Dave's book about what a race walking shoe should have in it. And then find one that feels good and seems to work for you.
So you want a low heel, you want flexibility under the ball of the foot, you want a wide enough toe box, you want a firm enough heel counter, right? Because if you just say what works for you, there's hundreds and hundreds of shoes.
There is,
when listening and advice as to how to narrow that down. You've at least got to narrow the feel down.
Exactly. I wasn't sure how much you wanted, but yeah, I'm a shoe geek, so that's exactly it. I mean, in addition to just sort of finding the characteristics in a shoe that is good for race walking, you want that shoe to, be wide enough at the forefoot, especially in race walking, where that foot can even get hotter and expand more than even in running. So you want not to be confined at the forefoot. So that's feeling comfortable. There's enough room. There's enough toe room, so you're not slamming on the front and losing toenails. You want your ankle bone as well not to be rubbing on the collar of the shoe, and as well with race walking, even the heel counter. Sometimes in a running shoe, it'll actually kind of come in a little bit at the heel, which you may not notice for running, but I find in race walking that can actually dig into the back of your Achilles there at the back. So a whole bunch of factors. So width, length, the feel, how your foot fits in there. It shouldn't be rubbing. It should be comfortable at the get-go. All those things you want to do in addition to finding one that really works for race walking.
Great. All right, that was two. Third best piece of advice, and then we'll move on.
Oh God, you're squeezing me. Third best piece of advice.
What somebody correcting your technique? How about that?
Yeah. I think the biggest one I found was, I think, originally when I did a clinic with you. I want to mention too that I did during the pandemic, I did do an online clinic with you and Tim Seaman that I found quite helpful, where you were able to actually sort of take a screenshot from an image or a video and look at look at a person's race walk technique. I found that extremely helpful. Like I say, I did pick it up fairly well, so I was doing okay, but there were definite things that can be picked up.
Name one.
That's what I'm getting
All
there.
right.
I'm getting there. So I think this isn't necessarily one that right off the bat someone gave me, but I think it's a misconception about race walking that I want to mention as well, that I think I've talked about with a few people over the years now that have been doing this, is that we often talk about race walking as a wiggle. I mean, it kind of gets talked about, where someone's hips are going back and forth. It's a big wiggle of the hips. And I think it's whether it's a tip or something to think about as you're race walking, is that there really shouldn't be a huge side to side movement. Your hips are more moving forward and back. Your hip has to come up to accommodate that straight leg as you race walk. It comes underneath you. And it does come out a little bit to accommodate that sometimes. But I think when people see it in jokes or videos or whatever, when they think about race walking, they think about somebody, even when you're learning it, you may think that you should be kind of moving side to side. But like running, race walking is a sport where the whole goal is to move forward as fast as you can. And with proper race walk technique, correct me here, Jeff, if I'm wrong, is what I've learned is you should really view it as your hips moving forward and back to accommodate that, kind of throwing that leg forward and everything else. And there is some side to side, but yeah, if you're doing a lot of wiggling side to side, that's something to pay attention to, because that really isn't necessarily what you want, and it could indicate other problems with your technique.
So I'll answer your question of is it correct with a quote from the master Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan said the truth depends upon a certain point of view.
Yeah,
so relative to the ground, the hips move forward, they do not move back. Right. So you're constantly rotating forward. And as you rotate forward, you also have to come up and down a little bit and out and back a little bit, but it's predominantly forward. Yeah. To the body, you could say relatively one hip is moving back when the other one moves forward, right? But if you're a spectator looking at somebody going by, it's a progression of the hips moving forward, forward, forward. All right. We're going to take you off the hot seat. We'll talk for a second. And I did not queue up a copy of the cover, so let me just pull that off of here. Somebody wants to open. Come on. There we go. All right. So let's talk about your book, Learning to Race Walk. You wrote primarily not as, if I can paraphrase, not as a guide on how to race walk, but how to discover race walking.
Yeah, I wanted to, like you said, I didn't want to come across, what I wanted to do is point towards yourself, other coaches, other experts, resources to really help someone like myself who was trying to learn to race walk. I first wanted to share my experience, what it was like to learn the sport and the techniques. I wanted to share that. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for as well, is to confirm, like, what's it like for everybody else? Like, how is it for you? So I wanted to share that, how I found it, technique, shoes, everything. And then what I wanted to do was go, okay, here's some basics that, here's some information that I picked up, like a brief information about the sport, and then pointing towards where you could learn more. And I kind of did that for all the topics, kind of going through, tried to provide sort of a progression of, history of the sport, what is the sport, what's the technique, not go into in depth, but just give kind of like a summary, my perspective, my experience, and then point towards people can find more information from experts, people who've been at it for a long time. Someone like yourself who's very young but has a lot of time in the sport.
I'll take that. I'll take that. So let's talk about, so obviously people who get the book will find resources of other books, other videos, social media outlets, lots of places to start your search where you started cold and didn't, just hit Google and started looking. You sort of filtered that down into a more condensed, intelligent view of what you can find that's out there.
Yeah, I hope it comes across as intelligent.
We say everything as a positive, right? So, and I was fortunate enough, full disclosure, I was reading pre-releases of the book, so I'm very well versed with what's in there. But you kept iterating over it and improving it. And one of the things that you did, which I think a lot of good walking books do, is they get experts in the field to give their best advice. And I don't know how many experts you have, but I'm going to guess it's probably 20 or more.
Yeah, I had
right?
I had the privilege of connecting with a lot of cool people in there. So you and Dave are in there, Carmen's in there.
So you use last names for those people.
Sure, yeah, Carmen Jakinski, who is the founder of Reshod Race Walking Shoes. She's a coach and race walker and has a passion for the sport, making her own shoes. Yourself, Dave McGovern, and if you haven't met, don't know him, Google, another coach, and books and resources on the internet as well. So in the US, amazing. So he's got some advice in there. And then I've gone to masters levels.
Let's name drop. Okay. So
okay, I'm gonna name drop. Okay.
We're gonna play the game and I'll start. Obviously, Evan Dunphy has given advice in the book, right?
Well, actually, Evan's busy, so I have a quote from Evan in a profile, but Evan's just been too busy doing his thing.
Okay.
So I pulled a quote from him. Rachel Seaman, Canadian Olympian, she's provided some advice, really helpful. She's got some stuff.
Isn't she still the Canadian record holder?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think she's got at least one or two Canadian records still.
Yeah.
And then I kind of go through the gamut, going from younger race walkers in the Canadian U.S. Community, such as sorry, brain's going dead now. Alger. Okay. Let me go from the oldest to the youngest. So I've got Masters, Joanne Flipson, in Canada here, who's a Masters race walker who has more records than I can even list. Really talented at the Masters level. So that's someone. I've got David Swartz, who's another Masters race walker in the US. Lots of records and experience, providing his perspective and advice. So I kind of go for Masters. I've got probably the GOAT of race walking. Everybody's got their debate of who's the greatest of all time, but Robert Korzeniowski.
So let's pause there. So people who don't know who Korzeniowski is, he's a 4-time Olympic gold medalist, master of the 20 and the 50K.
Yeah, he's undoubtedly probably one of the best, if not the best, race walker in terms of success and records and medals. So really amazing guy who's also doing a lot in Europe right now, trying to promote race walking with a group called Walking Lovers. So he's still in the sport. So I reached out to him. We had a chat online, which was amazing. And he provided some advice. So taking people like that, in Olympians, Robin Stevens, US race walker, provided me some tips and advice, and photos of her when she was, up and coming race walker. So a lot of people like that. So I was able to get some advice from Tim Barrett, multiple Olympian in Canada, provided, some advice on his experiences and for race walkers. So that's kind of peppered in there. There's a quote from your kind of race walkers who's been at it for a little bit, his advice on what, from their experiences, Masters race walkers, up and coming race walkers at the maybe collegiate level, masters. I peppered that in so it's not just me talking, but you get a profile and some information about a race walker in Canada, US, and the occasional one outside of Canada, US. So I do have a few people there. I won't, there's interesting tidbits in there as well, and in profiles.
All right, so I'm going to make you say one more thing, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
But give me one piece of advice that you got from somebody else that's in the book that will tantalize people to go out and get your book and read it. So whether it's from Rachel or Korzanowski or even just a beginner, give us one more interesting adage.
Something interesting make you want to, and okay, well, this is the fun thing. Okay, then I will say, I'm hoping the book will be kind of fun. It was meant to be kind of light and an easy read as well. So, not that your guys' books aren't great, the training manuals, but what I mean, this is a fun read where I think go and get it because there's mixed in there with all the, technique and what you should do and shoes and stuff like that. There is the interesting profiles. And then I throw in some interesting tidbits about the sport. And that's one of the things that I find really interesting about race walking is the history and little things you'll find out. So there are some definite fun little tidbits I've thrown in there, and I'll give you one because you're squeezing me for it. So I found some interesting facts. So Dracula is a race walker. Okay, so not Dracula. Okay, but the author Bram Stoker was, in fact, a race walker and quite successful at it. I wasn't able to get all his stats, but I went and did some research in it. He was a walker and a very fast one indeed, and quite successful, and an athlete in addition to a writer. So I throw in some fun stuff there as well that I hope people find interesting. So
there, you see, now you've stepped it up, right? Because you picked the perfect example. And we didn't rehearse this for anyone listening.
No.
Noel and I didn't go over what we were going to talk about. Like we just said, hey, hop on. But I am actually an aficionado of some older horror stuff, and my favorite author is Richard Matheson, who was the first one who modernized the vampire kind of tales. And I had no idea that Bram Stoker was a race walker until I read your first pass on the book. And what did I do? I Googled and started looking it up, and I'm like, wow, like, see, so someone as new as you into the sport can take someone as seasoned as I am and just open our eyes. And I think that is the fun of your book, is that, I wasn't trying to write a fun and humorous book. I was writing a technique guide. I was writing a training guide. My videos, like Walk Wars and things like that, are where I try to do my creative stuff. I don't try to mesh the two too much because, my first video, I did a Seinfeld impersonation of him making fun of race walking.
I've seen that one.
Right. And one of my mentors was like, Jeff, it's atrocious. You have to take it out. Not appropriate, and I didn't agree with him, but you've got to walk that line, right? So you're walking the line of entertainment, get people motivated, which is great. Mohandas, you've been quiet sitting there. Do you have any questions for Noel before we wrap up?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, sir.
Okay, appreciate it. All right, Noel, you want to say anything in closing, or I guess they could buy the book on Amazon?
It should. The book is on Amazon.ca.com, and I think almost every Amazon site out there. So if you don't know where to find it, either Google my name. There it is right there. So you can put my name, Noel Paine, into your Amazon search, or search up Learn to Race Walk, and you should find it. And if not, I am on social media, mainly Twitter right now. So it's at Noel Paine. And I have an Instagram account for Canadian race walking, where you can say connect with me as well and look at some of the stuff I put up there for the Canadian race walking community. And I also try and just promote race walking in general there, profiling some folks. So connect with me, check out the book. I really hope it was a personal project because I have a passion for the sport now, but the goal was really to hopefully just help a few other people get started, whether it mainly focused in the US and Canada, but for any race walker.
Great. All right. How do I get back to us? Come on. Oh, I got to stop screen share. That's why. Yeah, I've
There you
only
go.
been doing this for 4 years, and I still forget how to work the Zoom controls. I think we
Technology.
all do. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Noel. We're gonna put this up tomorrow morning on YouTube, and I'll catch you online. Take care.
Thanks, my friend.